one of the things that really stands in our way is, I don't know if I can get through this. I don't know if it's worth it. And there is like a disappointment related to the concept of whatever's going on being difficult. For some reason, for a lot of us, we feel that things should go easy. And there should be a sense of flow. And in some areas, that's correct. There should be a sense of flow, that internal flow. But what really happens where we struggle the most is when we face a difficulty. What's happening is we're trying to figure everything out in that moment. So a lot of times we're not even sure, or we don't have clarity on the decisions that we want to make. And that in itself, I think, could sometimes be the most painful. So when we think about doing something hard, if we have a clear vision and we understand the results, and we know that there's some kind of guarantee, for most of us, we have no problem moving in that direction, no matter how challenging it might be. Where the pain becomes painful is with the uncertainty, when we're not sure, when there's a lack of clarity. So that's one piece of it. So one of the questions that go through our mind is this even worth it? So the thing is when we're thinking about something like that, there's usually a lot of projections. We're projecting externally, we're intellectualizing rather than coming into our body. So we're in our heads, and there's a lot of calculating going on, rather than grounding ourselves in our body, focusing on the present, of the quality of the present. So if I say to you, there's no past and there's no future. Everything will depend on how you navigate from here today. So let's break that down a little bit. So when we think of our experiences, there are a couple components. And one of those are, what do we do for ourselves? What is those self-soothing mechanisms? How do we interact with ourselves when something becomes difficult? When something is challenging, do we have a safe place to go? And that means an inner support system. So for a lot of us, and I know this even for myself, I had a chaotic week last week. Baruch Hashem, this week was much better. The first thing I did was reach out. And I was like, oh, I need help in these areas. And yes, Baruch Hashem, I'm getting the help I need from the outside. But as I began to self-regulate, right, there was a lot of chaos, there was a lot of movement, there are a lot of moving pieces. And in our lives, there usually are a lot of moving pieces. But when there is no resolution, right, when we're not at the place of knowing the outcome, especially for women, there could be this sense of anxiety, underlying anxiety that can follow us around because we're not really sure of what is coming. And because of that, we struggle, right? So we jump into the past, into what happened before, right? What happened in the past. And then we almost perpetuate this reality of feeling anxiety in the moment, rather than finding a way to self-regulate. So for myself, when that kind of thing happens, I usually take some time for myself. It's going inside rather than outside. So I did my efforts of making the appointments I needed to make. And then on the inside, I began to sit with myself, breathe, really ground myself, and think of it out almost as like, parts of us kind of get marching orders and we get pulled in many directions. And then what we have to do is come back and unite all the pieces of ourselves. And as soon as I was able to bring all those pieces back together and be completely rooted in the reality of right now, the first thing that happened is that I kind of relaxed. There was this sense of relaxation, and the edge of urgency was released. The second piece was I have to trust that everything will resolve itself. As in, I'm not always responsible to resolve everything that comes up. There's a natural order in the world. Things resolve themselves. As women, a lot of times we want to take charge, and it's difficult to watch even the painful painful or insecure feelings come up for others or even for ourselves. And the first thing we want to do is pacify. So instead of thinking of pacifying per se, allowing to self-regulate, which is you're not shutting the emotion up, right? Not judging it, because a lot of times when we have an emotion or an insecurity that shows up, we jump to a conclusion really fast. We're like, no, this can't be here, rather than allowing it to be there and without the judgment. Another interesting thing is to allow it to be there without the pain. So noticing if there is an experience that might be overwhelming you, that not necessarily is painful or not necessarily is correlated to suffering, but it's just overwhelming. But for a lot of us, we were kind of taught to connect it to something complex so it could be valid. And if we begin to peel back a little bit, we start to understand that simplicity can also be challenging. And that's okay. When you allow yourself to go through the emotion, don't complicate it. Just let it be what it is. And as it moves through the world, you just allow it to come back to you in the space where you're able to embrace the emotion and ground it and find peace within. And that's the part that you're responsible for, and the rest is not up to you. There are other pieces, there are other people, there's a creator of the world that is involved in how the world works. There are the laws of nature. Things work themselves out. But a lot of times we'll step into places that we don't even need to step into, and take initiative in places we don't need to initiate, as almost like it's not productive, but we think it's productive and we think it'll help. But the solutions are allowing emotions to run their course, allowing situations to run their course. And when we're feeling overwhelmed, to reach inside rather than outside. Find a way to quiet some of the chaos and find the support within, neutralizing our own nervous system. So that's one piece. The other piece is really getting clarity on your mission, your vision. If there's something that's really important to you, you'll be willing to put in the work. And when the hard parts show up, it's like having to climb a mountain. If you look at the mountaintop, it's really, really difficult to think, how am I going to get up there? It's too much. And you're right, it is too much to assess in the present moment. The beauty of the present moment is to assess the present moment, is to try to find all the strength you have to step into the next step with the highest quality of performance you can. And that is what guarantees a better future. Based off of like last week when we were talking about Pinchas and the concept of how he was able to like perform in the moment that he needed to perform. The training that went in was the day-to-day quality of showing up. And it's not necessarily looking for that external recognition, because a lot of times we don't, in our path, in our vision, we're the only ones that can see the end game. We're the only ones that have the clarity of where we want to go. And there can be others that will disagree, because everybody has a different value system. So even within, like, even if you all practice similar things, just like you have different faces, you will have different values. And each one of us have something really beautiful to create in this world, to build off of. And we're not supposed to be copying and pasting somebody else's experience. It's more about our own individual experience. So taking note that if somebody else isn't able to acknowledge your progress, or you don't have the recognition and you feel like this is so hard, like going up that mountain, just look back at how far you've come. Try to measure the progress, and that will give you usually a lot of encouragement into how to move forward. And if you like where you're going, that's when you copy and paste. You keep doing what you're doing. But if you are finding you're in a place where things are difficult and you're not liking the results, and life is hard, two things have to happen. To get different results, we need to learn different things, right? New things. So it's important to take that time to educate yourself. And there's a lot of different avenues of education, so feel free to tap into that. And the second thing, the hardships that you might be facing, can be connected to resistance. Sometimes that resistance being that we are ignoring our internal process. We're listening to everybody but ourselves. We keep on trying everybody else's process but ourselves. And sometimes that's just unnecessary difficulty. There's an internal authenticity that we each have. And it's important to take that time to build that internal trust. That inner trust is really important. And I'm not just saying like kind of go crazy, but sometimes we know things about ourselves, and sometimes we have these deep desires to, or visions to enter a certain space or curiosity in life, and there's a fear of either, am I not strong enough? Am I not, will I be accepted? Is this uniqueness inside of me? Am I too different? Will it be, so back to the acceptance. There's a lot of fear of acceptance either, and then there's the fear of failure. A quote that I shared was, fear is the price of admission, right? Fear will always be there. But I heard Alex Hermosi say, he's like, so what? So what? For a lot of us, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of things that are oriented around taking those steps, and they could be painful. But I think the most painful or the most suffering that any of us experience is usually neglecting that inner process, the inner guidance, and the true self. So as you move into your experience, take the time to, again, and to discover this part of yourself. It's really important to take the time to get to know yourself. You have to spend some time with yourself, familiarizing yourself. That happens outside of everyone else. So if you're sitting in a meditation, it's like layers and layers of the world. You kind of have to peel back. And as you sit, right, so like, simple concept, if you walk into a coffee shop, and you're there for a while, you'll come out smelling like the coffee shop. That residue will stick, and it'll take some time. Sometimes you need to change your clothes or take a shower. Same thing with the gym or anywhere else you've been. That the experience, the environment has an influence on you, if you'd like it or not. The only way to really begin to tap into our own experience, our internal guide, is to spend enough time with ourselves away from that external environment, create a deep relationship with ourselves, and get to know the process. And then from there, you're able to build. Right? So like, even for myself, I can feel really, really comfortable in my own experience, and then feel insecure when I'm out. And then I'll come back in and remind myself that, no, I do really love the person that I am and the person that I've become. It's just that, yeah, when it's, I guess, in a different space, in somebody else's context, in a space where, I guess, even the things that I appreciate other people don't appreciate, then yeah, naturally those insecurities will come up because they don't have the same values. So it doesn't mean that I'm less. It just means that that isn't the place for me, or there isn't space for that there. And that's okay. And I come back into my own reality and anchor myself back in that acceptance. So taking the time to notice, even when those insecurities do show up. Asking yourself, do you want to be in those places where you're feeling a little insecure as well? So yeah, so that's that. I think we can totally take some questions. Just give me 1 second. But yeah, so that's kind of that. I think that gives you enough information to kind of go off and do your own thing. And thank you so much for listening today. And yeah, we'll do the question part of this. Just give me a second.